Hi there. Thanks so much for joining me today. Um, I'm Randi Roberts. I'm an executive and career life coach, and my work is dedicated to helping you love your work while you're achieving your goals. And we're going to try and do a little bit of that today. So, really, really glad that you're here. If you're joining live, great. If you're watching this later, as most people do, that's great too. Just really glad that you're spending the time. And if you are here, if you've joined today, then obviously boundaries is a topic that speaks to you. I find myself talking to clients a lot about boundaries. And you would think that because I'm so pro boundaries and work with my clients about the topic quite a bit in order to take control of their work and their lives, you would think that I'm good at it. But I have my days where I'm very good at it, but the thing that I can tell you is this is absolutely a practice. It's like yoga, it's like meditation, it's like all the other things that I have to work really hard at. Um, it is something that you can expect yourself to not be perfect at. And the good news there is it takes some of the pressure off. If you're great at it, wonderful. And if you have your bad days, it's an opportunity for tomorrow to be better. So, I guess I would say be kind to yourself as we dive into this conversation about boundaries. And I'm sure that there will be something there for you. And know that as I say that to you, I'm hoping that I can be kind to myself too. So let's dive in. I see and hear a lot of discussion about boundaries lately. Now, part of it may be that it's such an important topic to me, so I tune into it a little bit. But I think that you're probably finding that too. And so, what do we even mean by that? Some people tend to talk about boundaries as though they're like negative things, like they're selfish things. But really, what they are is about making choices how you spend your resources. It's as simple as that. It's about making choices about how you spend your time, what gets your attention, what gets your money, whatever those resources are, you're setting boundaries for how those things are moving out of your life. And so what they're bringing back into your life. And the truth is, if you're not making those choices, something else is making those choices for you. Whether it's your family, whether it's your boss, whether it's your team, whether it's your level of overwhelm and exhaustion. So I'm going to make a case for you being in charge of that and making those choices for yourself. And the truth is, if you don't, there's a real cost to that. It might be, it might be causing that overwhelm. It might be sapping your energy. It might be your focus getting pulled in too many different directions. It may impact your relationships, work or personal. And one of the things that you may not prioritize, and I would love for you to, is it may cost you the enjoyment and your enthusiasm for the job and the career that you've worked so hard to build. So hopefully I've made the case for why it's worth thinking about this and putting some of these things into action. The thing I can tell you is something is going to fall off your plate. And it would be great if you chose what that was rather than letting forces around you choose what that is. So when it comes to boundaries, there's kind of two approaches you can take. And I'll call one the fence approach and the other one the driver's seat approach. And I think the fence approach is one of the reasons why we resist setting boundaries a little bit. Sometimes that fence approach can cause resistance because it can feel like we're pushing things away. It can feel like we are setting up walls or keeping people out. It can feel very rigid and unfriendly and maybe not how we want to define ourselves. It may be the thing that's causing resistance. And I think if you're not comfortable with boundaries, we may tend to lean a little bit more that way. Think about it as the reasons that we can't do things, the things we want to keep out, the things that we want to say no to. Another approach may be the driver's seat approach. And you can think about it as this is your life. You want to be in the driver's seat, not in the passenger seat. So if you're in the driver's seat, it's not about saying no to things, it's about saying yes to the right things. Because truthfully, if you're never saying no to anything, you are never saying a truly powerful yes to other things. So full permission to say no in the service of saying a really deep yes. So what does a driver's seat look like? It looks like you getting clear on how you want to spend your time, how you want to spend your energy, and what gets your attention. And by making those choices, you know what to say no to, and your focus naturally goes there. It does a lot of things for you. It not only leans you in the right direction, but it allows you to give yourself permission to really say no and lean into the things that you're choosing. It can be hard at first, but it gets a lot easier with practice. So, that's the difference there. The fence version of setting boundaries is keeping things out. The driver's seat version is taking control of what comes in. So it's a very different way of looking at it. And sometimes one of the problems we have is that we have so many things that we're calling priorities that it's just hard to let any of them go undone. But the truth is that those aren't priorities. That's a to-do list. And your to-do list can be as long as you need it to be. I love putting things on my to-do list because sometimes it feels so good to cross them off. But when it comes to true priorities, it's a matter of making the choices of where you're going to put your time and attention, because the reality is there's always going to be too much on your plate. If you're in a really meaningful role, there's always going to be too much on your plate. So you can choose what falls off. And it's interesting because for me, it's one of the reasons that I used to love marketing is because there was always more to do than I could do. Like I know I'm at my best in some ways when I'm pulled in a lot of different directions and I'm busier than I know what to do with. But the trick is choosing the things that fall off your plate and getting comfortable with that. So that's what the fence versus the driver's seat is about. It's not about being selfish. Like boundaries are not selfish, they are strategy. And strategy is just about making choices. So I think the first big step is getting comfortable with that. And then the next step is putting it into action. So hang with me because at the end, I'm actually going to provide an action guide for you that can make it easier to start this, make it easier to put it into practice. So, you know what? The biggest thing that gets in the way of us setting these boundaries is guilt. It may not feel like guilt to you, but it may feel like, oh, I'm going to let them down, or I'm not going to be available to my team, or what if my boss thinks I'm slacking, or I'm not going to get to this thing that my kids really need. I mean, that's basically it, is the guilt stops us from setting the boundaries. So we think we can do it all, and we're usually fooling ourselves. You usually will be more productive if you make those choices, which things to do and which things to leave undone, and set those expectations with people rather than having that weight on you all the time. So, the good news about the guilt is that is basically it exists in our own heads and we can influence that having less of an impact on it. So just acknowledge that it's there, and then you can reframe it for yourself and get past it a little bit, not let it control you in the same way. And here's the reframe. Guilt is not proof that you're doing something wrong. If it shows up, it does not mean you're bad. It does not mean you're doing this less well than anybody else. It does not mean you're doing something wrong. In fact, a lot of times it's evidence that you're doing exactly what you need to do, because you may have been overcompensating, trying to do too much, not making the choices you need to make to really have an impact in a more select group of ways. So when that guilt comes up, it often is a signal that you are on the right track, that this is an area that needs to be addressed. So thinking about it that way can really make it a lot easier. You won't bring up as much conflict for yourself if you just recognize it as part of the process and, in fact, anticipate it. So think about it. What's the area where your own boundaries are being tested most right now? This is kind of where the action guide starts. And in putting my thoughts together for this talk, I thought about this for myself, and I had to acknowledge that I am not right now, I am not doing a good job of picking my own priorities because I've got a lot of other things going on. I have my work, which is so important and so meaningful and rewarding for me, but I'm also in a phase in my life where I'm actively trying to give back. So I've got a number of different nonprofit and community resources that I'm giving time to. And I have let myself get into immediate response mode, which trains other people that I'm available to them all the time and doesn't allow me to focus deeply. So that's the thing that I've had to acknowledge right now needs some work and needs some boundary setting. But I'm kind of curious what it is for you. So think about that. Think about what's the area that's causing you pain that you could put a little bit of attention to that would really make the biggest difference. And then once you've identified what that thing is, the action guide will help you walk through taking some action on it. And we'll get back to that in a bit. Sometimes it's helpful to think about, like, what's the fear? What's the fear of uh, what the pushback might be that you may expect if you do take boundaries? Are you afraid you're going to let people down? Are you afraid that that you might not be communicating very well? What the reason is that's not getting your immediate attention. And sometimes identifying what that fear is actually is really, really helpful. It's not that you can make it go away, but expecting it can avoid it surprising you. It's like when it comes on, you're okay, this is exactly what I thought was going to happen. And it makes it a little bit easier to address it. So planning for that and thinking about that can actually be really helpful to getting past it. So here's a little bit of a twist on this. You will experience resistance because you're building a new habit when it comes to setting and holding your boundaries. So learn to embrace the resistance because, again, proof, others having resistance or you even having resistance is proof that you're on the right track. If a new boundary doesn't create any friction at all, it's not something that you need to go after. It it's really the areas where you're experiencing that resistance, where it needs some attention. And you've heard me say this a lot before. It's like if you are in your comfort zone, if there's no resistance anywhere, you are not growing in the same way. So if you're feeling that resistance to boundaries, embrace it as part of the process, embrace it as part of the growth. And you once you do that, you are just going with the process a little bit more, reducing your own barriers to the boundaries, and it'll make it that much easier to build it as the habit that you're trying to build. The goal here is to build these things so you can stop thinking about them. They become a bit more automatic. Right now is the hard part. Right now is where you really have to think about it. But something that's important for you to keep in mind is changing this habit and establishing and holding your boundaries and supporting that in others is how you build a culture. Those boundaries that you keep or don't become the expectation that others around you will have, and they'll learn that about you for good and for bad. I mean, um, if you continually break your own boundaries, you haven't created any need for others to respect them and hold them. So it really does start with you. And, culture is about what you do, not what you say. So you may say all the right things about setting boundaries and holding them and respecting them in others. And if you're constantly breaking your own, you aren't setting culture. You're actually doing what you're not doing what you say. It's about people seeing what you do is the really important part there. So it's about making your choices and giving yourself permission to really hold that line um, whenever it gets uncomfortable, and it does get easier. Sometimes when you feel that resistance, one of the things that can be helpful is to think about what could be possible if you're able to make this change. Like, what is the pain point that's causing you to choose this, and how can it be better? So, I talked early on about overwhelm. If you're able to hold those boundaries, you may feel less overwhelmed. That may be the payoff for you. And what happens then? You can think more clearly. You can act more clearly. You spend less time doubting yourself. You're able to move on to the next thing. Like, there's all these things that come with lack of overwhelm. And so if you're finding a lot of resistance to setting your boundaries and holding them, just take a moment to envision what can be better on the other side for having done this. What's the payoff? If you get clear on that, sometimes that really can help you push through the pain. One thing to think about and plan for is, how are you going to handle it when you slip up on this, when you let your boundaries slip? And I can promise you that unless you're superhuman, you will slip up. You're building a new habit. This is what we do. This is how we build it. And so one of the things that I really encourage is to be honest about it, is to name it, call it out, acknowledge it, and then you reset the boundary. Because if you don't do that, if you pretend that it didn't happen or that it didn't matter, all you're doing is not establishing that habit and falling back into other patterns. So you won't get the benefit of all of this effort that you've put in. What you want to do is name it. And this is always a good idea when it comes to some kind of a leadership skill that you're trying to adopt, or a principle that you believe in that you somehow violate. And we do this. People learn a lot about you by how you handle it. So go ahead and narrate it. It's not that complicated or difficult, but what you can do is really just say something like, I told you all that you're talking to your team. I told you that I was going to be really checked out on my vacation, and I found myself slipping and answering a couple of emails. I'm asking for your help in supporting that. Don't reach out to me unless, something's truly urgent, or don't expect to hear back from me unless you call out something is truly urgent. Like, speak to it, let them know what your intention is, let them know that you slipped up, and let them know what you're going to do differently. That will reinforce it for you, but it also does not rescind the permission you've given them to do the same thing. So you're human. Just it's another good thing to plan for, because when it happens, you won't be surprised by it. So that's an easy way um, to address it when it happens. And narrating it really reinforces it. Ignoring it suggests that it's not important, and it is. You said it is. So it's great to behave in that way. So, we've talked a bit about the importance of setting the boundary. We've talked a bit about the approaches you can take in terms of viewing them as fences versus climbing into the driver's seat, the resistance that you may have. We've talked about what you can do when you slip up, which you will. And now let me just close with bringing your attention to the action guide, which you can find in the link here, or if you're watching this later, it may be in the description section. You can find the link to the action guide. It's super simple. Basically, what it does is it helps you to identify the one thing that you can do to make the biggest difference in building this habit. And you can do it today. You can pick one small thing. You can do it today. You can do it this week and really get going on this right away. So really what you'll do is just take a look at what is the area that you're currently in the passenger seat, that you haven't made the clear choices, that you're letting something else drive your priorities. And then you just decide one action you're going to take on it this week. Like for me, I mentioned that I am in immediate response mode right now, and I am letting that happen. So I really feel like I need to break that, because what I'm doing is when my focus is on my work, except for the client time where I put my phone aside and pay really close attention to my client, but when I'm doing the other parts of my work, I'm letting these things creep in. So I know what I want to do is, that's the boundary that I'm setting, is really set aside the time for focus on my work. So in order to make that happen, the specific action I've decided to take is to set aside 3 hours, 3 hour chunks, 3 times a week, to really focus on the other things, the community oriented things that I'm doing. And what I need to do is hold myself accountable to not responding except during those chunks of time. And I can tell you, just even saying it is painful. So I know it's going to be difficult and it's going to take some effort on my part. That's okay. I can do it. One of the other things that's important to think about, and that's called out on the action guide, is what I'm going to do if I need support or accountability. So for me, there are two people in my lives that are very strong supporters of mine. One person is another coach that we do a lot of work together on our businesses. The other is a partner of mine in some of this community oriented work that I do. And I'm going to use them I'm going to tell them what it is that I'm doing, and I'm going to let them know that I'm going to put them on call if I need some help to support it. So I'm setting the expectation with them and asking for their support. And I chose them intentionally because they will not be too nice to me about this. I have other friends, my sister, people in my lives who are like the true cheerleaders, but I didn't choose them because I think they'll be too nice. They'll help me find excuses. They'll tell me why I'm right. That is what I need in some moments, but that's not what I need here. I need people who will ask me questions like, what got in your way? What can you do to get around it? That's why these folks are my accountability partners in these areas. And it may be someone to give you accountability. It may be tracking in your own calendar. Like, what works for you. But if you plan for that, you really can build it into a habit. A couple other questions that the action guide will help you to ask are, what are you afraid will happen if you set this boundary? We talked about that a little bit earlier on. Naming that takes away its power. So it's great to think about that up front. It's also helpful to think about where you may experience pushback, because thinking about who it is that may push back and what their objection may be can give you an opportunity to anticipate that and how you're going to reset, or what you're going to do to respond to that and not let that change your trajectory. And also, what are you going to do when you slip up? We already talked about that it's likely to happen. So anticipating what you want your response to be can really help you keep going for it. And another thing that I suggest you think about, and it's the last thing on the action guide, is what will be different when you put this boundary into action. So for me, if I do a better job of holding that boundary between my work and some of the community work that I do, I think I'll feel less torn. I will feel less guilty about not responding to somebody right away. I will know that I'll get to it later in its right time. And if it creates some friction, or if someone else is held up or something, we can reset those priorities so that I get to keep my boundaries rather than others setting them for me. So I've kind of walked you through the action guide a little bit. It's available to you through the link or through the description here. It's just a really simple guide to take you through the steps you can take to try and put this into practice. I mean, you're here. You're paying attention to the topic, so it's obviously important for you. And I think those suggestions on the action guide can help you put it into practice. So let me know how it works for you. Let me know if you have other ideas that work for you. I'd love to try them myself. I'd love to share them with others. But hopefully you spending a little bit of time thinking about and planning for your boundaries can make this easier for you, can make you even more productive. And to bring it back to something I mentioned in the beginning, can help you tap back into the enjoyment of the work that you put so much time into. So, again, thanks for joining. Look forward to seeing you soon.